Howdy, howdy, my friends in Benzo land. How are you guys holding up today? I hope you're doing all right. I wanted to talk a little bit about benzo-induced trauma. And this is something that can be a missing piece of the puzzle. You know, a lot of what I do as a coach is, it feels like almost like, at first, initially anyway, a mathematician. I'm trying to figure out this math formula with you guys. What is it? Now, sometimes it's not, often it's not as simple as, well, Dave, I'm going through benzo withdrawal. Now, sometimes there's a variable in there that can really arrest things, right? So, for example, I had a client who was OCD. If she didn't have the OCD, she could taper. Well, what happens was she would wake up in the middle of the night after only a few hours of sleep, start panicking obsessively that she would not get back to sleep, and updose. She would take an extra piece of benzo, sometimes double her dose. Then, of course, as you know, she would, the next week would be hell for her. And this process just kept happening, and she kept tapering, but it was so hard. And we kept trying to hit this thing. Okay, if we could reduce the OCD, then she could sleep, then she could taper. Okay, and we can't do that. Okay, if she could sleep, then the OCD would go down, then she could taper. If she could taper and get off the drug, then the OCD would go down, especially because it was very much sort of a benzo-induced OCD. She had a little bit of OCD before, but as you guys are probably well aware, benzo kind of takes whatever you have and just goes crazy with it. It exacerbates what you have. If you had a little health anxiety, you're going to have a ton of health anxiety. If you had a little bit of sort of OCD, you're going to have a ton of OCD. If you had a little nerve pain or whatever it is, a little depression, it just sort of, almost like COVID. Like COVID was sort of like that, where it just sort of finds where your weakness is, and that's where it dwells. So sometimes it's like a math problem, trying to figure out what's the order of operation here. How do we hit this thing? Where do we come in, and what can we reduce? And sometimes trauma is really the missing piece. And so I've had clients that were struggling trying to get better, and they're doing the lulling and pushing as, the kind of the staples of my recovery program. And they would get to a point, to a certain point, I should say, of recovery, and they just kept hitting a wall. And there would be this very emotional response, and it would come on quick, something like, maybe it's about how the doctor ripped them off their meds, and whenever they would start to think about, God, that's that day the doctor ripped me off that med, my life turned upside down, and I almost died, and I went through all this horrendous pain and suffering. And then with that, the amygdala, that emotional processing center of the brain, gets hyper vigilant, sends a message to that hypothalamus fight or flight center, and then of course that's going to ring the alarm and send the troops out, so to speak, meaning cortisol and norepinephrine, adrenaline, which again exacerbates all your symptoms, right? So it's this nasty little loop between this amygdala, hypothalamus, the chemicals, symptoms arise, ruminations flare up, amygdala re-flares up, hypothalamus gets activated again, and here we go, round and round and round. So part of it is, part of recovery is sort of figuring out, how do we dull down that amygdala? How do we, and that's where CBT and mindfulness can be very powerful, But I digress. Trauma is like this automatic, almost like a smoke detector, that if you flick a match, you don't even have to light it. You flick the lighter, anything, a spark, and this alarm goes off, right? And so trauma creates these automatic bridges between these synapses, between these 2 points of whatever the stimulus, the motion, and then this reaction. And they can become really quick and really powerful, and it can be on anything, and anything can be a trigger. You could be sitting there feeling pretty good, having a good window, and you're watching a commercial, and there's just something about, or you're watching a show, and there's a doctor on there that just reminds you of that doctor that did you wrong, that harmed you so badly. And even on an unconscious level, you may not even respond to it right away, right? You might go, flip the channel, change the station. But then that night or that next day, symptoms are up. So sometimes quite often there's this delayed reaction that happens. So trauma can be that missing piece that we need to work on. And I've had clients that were struggling greatly, and then they got in and started to do some trauma work, started really processing some of that stuff. And that amygdala started to quiet down a lot, and they were releasing that trauma, they were processing it, they were accepting it, they were desensitizing to it. A lot of trauma work is actually desensitizing. It's sort of bringing up this experience, reprocessing it in a safe, vulnerable way, and purging it out, and the brain just starts to get bored with it, more or less. And So once it starts to get bored with it, then it no longer sends this over hypervigilant, hyperarousal response to the central nervous system, which again is going to die down the benzo symptoms, which is going to help you either withdraw or continue to recover, right? So that's the process. So, I don't know, look at your life, look at your situation, and ask yourself, is there some trauma? Should I be working on that? Now, here's the warning is, if that is true, are you ready for it? And do you have the right therapist? Do you have the right person? Not psychiatrist. Let me just say this now, guys. If you have a psychiatrist, a medical doctor who's trying to do therapy, you don't have a therapist. Run away. Do not listen to them. They are not a therapist. They are a medical doctor playing a therapist. It's like playing a cop on television. You're not really a cop, right? You're really not. So find a good therapist, a trauma therapist, do trauma work. And I wanted to say something else about that. It kind of got me on a tangent there. Realizing if this is the right time for your trauma work. It may not be, but it may be something that you come back to. Or it may be a time that you go, no, I kind of want to start working on this, but do it gradually, very small increments, and always combine that with something positive, something good. With my trauma work, I often like to do graded exposure using the 5 senses, which is kind of something I've been working with for a while, using the 5 senses of the body to retrain the limbic system. Instead of just the mind, use the body to tell the limbic system that it's safe. I'll do a video on that later. We can dive deeper into that. It's something I use in my coaching. But yeah, trauma work, see, assess that, see if that might be a missing piece there. There might be something that you need to purge and process. And if not, maybe it's something down the road. Now, that said, I wanted to say a few words just on my experience with trauma as a coach. And this is a very unique experience because maybe some of you are actually thinking about becoming a benzo coach at some point. And I would tell you, make sure you're really healed. Make sure you're really, really healed and you're really kind of far in your development and growth after this thing, because, man, that trauma, it's deep, and it remembers everything. And I came back and did coaching, and I was, years removed from this thing, and I thought I was in a really good place, and I was in a really good place. And once I started actually talking to people and hearing their stories and hearing how much they suffered, and it was just like deja vu. It all started coming back to me, just hearing symptoms. And I remember having these really tough conversations with myself late at night going, I don't know if I can do this. And so I would take 1 or 2 clients a day, and then I would have to skip days. And it was like, and it was starting to kind of worry me because I wanted to work in mental health. And at first I thought, am I not equipped to work in mental health? No, it's not mental health I'm working in that's so tough. It's digging this wound open, this wound that apparently wasn't completely healed. And it was just like deja vu. Anxiety started to increase, stress started to increase. I stopped sleeping a little bit. I was having almost somatic responses to things. It was just bizarre. And so what I had to do was I had to work through all that. And I actually saw this coaching as kind of a therapy for myself. And I thought, okay, well, like trauma work, I have to do this very slowly, very carefully. And so I initially started working really slowly, and I was processing and working through my own stuff during this whole time. And then I could take on a little more clients, and eventually, and now I'm to a point where I feel immune to it. I feel like I've really come through this other end. I work with people not every day, but most days of the week, several hours a day. And every day there's somebody crying on the phone with me, like somebody is suffering greatly. And that's still heavy. I don't care who you are or what you do, what you've been through, that's heavy. But it doesn't have that trauma response to me anymore. It's not making me dive deep and have these sort of reactions and feelings and emotions and thoughts and memories like the way that I used to. Sometimes they creep up. Sometimes I'm listening to a story and somebody's talking about some part of their journey or what they're suffering, and I just go, God, it's still there. You still remember that, you still remember the hell that you went through, but it's no longer something that I feel like I had to get away from. So just some thoughts here, on the topic of trauma. I think, again, eventually we'll see an inclusion to the DSM-6, maybe, hopefully, of benzo-induced complex PTSD. I don't know if that's a term yet. It's a term I've been using for about 5 years, benzo-induced complex PTSD. I think I'm pretty damn sure that's a real phenomenon there. I'm guessing probably many of you would agree. But trauma can be resolved. We can desensitize to it. We can change the symbolism of the trauma event as well. And I've talked a lot about this before, often using my fear of guns. I had a family member that was killed by a gun and really shook the family, really created just, to this day, some of the most heartache ever in the family. When something like that happens, just out of the blue, it just creates a shock wave, And for many years, I didn't like guns. I didn't want guns around me. I just had this, a gut reaction to them. And what happened was I started going and shooting clay targets with my uncle, who's a psychiatrist of all things. And at first I was just, it was just weird. I had weird dreams afterwards. I just, I didn't like it. I didn't respond to it. But what happened was I started to see it as a kind of an art form, because the gun wasn't about hunting. It wasn't about killing or anything violent. It was more of an art form. Shooting clay targets was kind of an art form. When you're shooting with a shotgun, for example, you don't aim down the reticle. It's more of an intuitive feeling that you have as you're shooting. You just feel the shot. It's very fascinating to me, and I was able to see the kind of the art form of it. And where we went to shoot, we were driving down these nature trails and on this little golf cart, and it was just very pretty out. It was very nice setups and these little stands out in nature and with wildlife and things like that. And I just started to like it. I was like, wow, I'm actually kind of shocked that I kind of like this. I'm not ready to go get guns and wear guns and be, a Walker Texas Ranger or nothing, but I kind of I like this. I would come shoot clays, And surely over about one summer, all my gun fears or trauma or, baggage just sort of resolved, and it was gone, and it was freeing, and you actually feel lighter. You feel more flexible. It's like you feel almost spiritually flexible. It's very hard to put into words. But to me, that's what, overcoming trauma looks like. It's this sense of lightness that comes over you, that this baggage, these hooks, this thing that's in the back of your mind pulling on strings in ways that you really can't even fully comprehend in the moment. It's like you don't really realize how much this stuff affects you until you're on the other side of it, until it's almost like a bad relationship. Like you don't realize how bad that relationship was for you till you're free from it. And then you go, oh my God, right? Well, anyway, I feel like I might have rambled a little bit there, but that's what I do, guys. So there's some words on trauma, some thoughts on trauma. And again, leave me some comments or some questions, and I'll try to answer those. And also, if you have any ideas for videos, let me know. I'm always looking for new video topics. What kind of things do you guys want to see and hear? What can I do to help you guys? If you're interested in benzo recovery coaching, go to www.powersbenzocoaching.com, and you can actually book a session online. There's a lot of information on coaching and what I do, how I do it, and all kinds of things there. So till then, guys, till next time, keep your heads up. Remember, everybody recovers. You will recover. Stay off the doom and gloom forums. Keep your mind right, and focus on what you can do, and learn to accept this right now. Accept it just for now. Okay, guys? You will heal. You will get better. And when you do, come back and say, Dave told you so. See you guys.
Run away, I don't have to plan it. I can go change my fate, you won't understand.